friends, to another edition of Faith Greater Than Fear. And I'm Mike Schrage. I'm here with GNPI in Joplin, Missouri. And today we've got a great friend of mine, Mark Moore. Mark, welcome.
Thank you, Mike.
Hey, tell us how things are going, what you're doing in life, and just a little bit of the station and position of what God and how He uses you.
I'm located here in Phoenix, Arizona. Just got back from an hour-long hike with a couple dudes up a mountain. So a ton of people outside. Our weather is conducive for that right now. It's not yet too hot, but we're just, like everybody else, sheltering in place, starting to get out now. Things here are opening up in Arizona. Of course, we're part of the wild, wild west, so we're going to do what we want to do anyway. And that probably some wisdom in that and probably some foolishness in that, frankly.
So out in Arizona, what's your role, Mark? What do you do and where do you do it?
Yeah, thanks. I'm a teaching pastor at Christ Church of the Valley. It is one of those like stupid large churches. We're not that good, but God is that good. And so, for example, last year we baptized over 4,000 people, and God has allowed us to spread across the valley. Our strategy is to put a campus every 20 minutes because though our members would drive an hour to get to church, their neighbors won't. And our priority is your unchurched neighbor, not you. So that's kind of a little bit about us. And so we're trying to figure out this whole thing of reopening, re-entering as a church to be socially responsible, but at the same time to be to fulfill God's call to worship together and be together as Christians.
Talking about your passion for the unreached, the neighbors, the pre-followers of Jesus, as I call them, what do you see this pandemic doing for us as a church to make ourselves more attractive, more engaging with those neighbors of ours who we don't know and who don't know Jesus like we know Him?
Yeah, so one of the things that, and this is not just at our church, but it's a consistent experience all across the nation, churches that have not had an online presence suddenly had to. So they leveled up. So a church of 300 is now acting like a church of 1,000. The consequence of that is, and we should have known this for a long time, that people, it is true. It's true of any area, whether it's a concert you go to or a new restaurant you go to. Getting someone in the door the first time that's the most difficult part. If they're escorted by someone they care about, that makes a big difference. So the consequence is now that all of our services are online, excuse me, it's easier to invite my neighbor to my house. Even digitally, I can invite them to my house. So a couple of things are converging as I see us looking at reopening. One is we've had to go online, and that is an easier invite to my non-Christian friends, neighbors, and colleagues. Now that they've experienced a little bit of who the pastor is and what the singing is like, it just makes it a whole lot easier for them to actually set foot on a physical campus. So I think that's going to happen. The other thing that's happening is one of the two guys I was hiking with today is a pre-Christian, and he's really reflecting on what have been the values that we've learned in this time. And I asked him straight up, what new habits do you want to develop? Well, eating more with the family, not being as busy as we have been. It's the dinner table, it's the walking around the neighborhood, is greeting your neighbors in a friendly way. Those are going to be open doors probably for about 90 days. We have that window before people settle back into their new normal.
So as the title of our episode, Faith Greater Than Fear this is the opportunity for those who own a faith to really go through those social bridges, to really share it, show it. Tell us some ways that you as a congregation have shown compassion and have shared the love of Christ to your communities.
Yeah, it's always a challenge, and what we've experienced is about a third of the people are like, I don't care about the virus, I don't care if I get the virus, I'm going about normal. About a third of the people, Christians included, are very, very hesitant. Some out of courtesy for those who might be in danger, some just because their natural personality is more fear-based. Those in the middle are going to be swayed one way or another based upon who they're in relationship with. Now, that's all of that is kind of set the background for an answer. As a faith community, our leadership is like, we're bullish. We're ready to go forward and have meetings, but we can't do that if we're not courteous. So part of what we've done, Mike, is immediately we set up our parking lot as a drive-through testing center, which they're still doing. Our church was the largest testing center in Phoenix. Here's the second thing we did, a blood drive. Sounds simple, but when people aren't getting out, they're not giving blood. So we had a severe shortage. Normally it takes about 3 weeks to set up one blood drive. We set up 10 in 2 days. And by the time we announced it on the weekend, there was only about 150 open slots out of 1,000 that they had. And the capacity issue wasn't on our side, it was actually on the city side. So part of what we discovered, Mike, is that when it comes to crises like this, the church, even smaller churches, local churches, are already experienced in social engagement at the grassroots level. Government is slow and they're clunky and they're disorganized. So, for example, we were going to open all of our sites to childcare. And the city government said, well, we already have 10 sites open for childcare for medical workers. Not only, like if you called each of those sites, they were not open or they had no spots open. The government didn't even know that. Secondly, we opened it up to 2 major hospital systems and they said, we don't need childcare. Our people aren't even coming into the hospitals right now. So we discovered that the church, who's better connected to local needs, is a better source for social compassion than the government. So instead of bashing our government, we should be creating relationships with mayors and governors and the White House to make sure that we provide our expertise in a time of need, because they will look to us. Who cares what the media says about us? People know better. When people have needs, they turn to the people of God.
Greatly said. And the fact is that we are, as a church, the best first responders, historically and relevantly even today, by the great illustrations that you've given. Mark, in your expertise of knowing God's word, in your journey with Him, what are some of the things that are going to help people in this re-entry phase? What's going to help us as Christians, and then also to bring along our pre-following neighbors into this new era that we're going to be entering in, that we've never been down before?
Yeah. Well, I think, Mike, there's 2 things we need to be aware of. One is at the interpersonal level, that I, as a Christian, don't live by the same level of fear. I'm thinking about my neighbor across the street, Jeremy and his wife. They got 3 sweet little kids. They don't know Christ. He is petrified right now, because if one of his kids gets sick or his parents die, that's the end. And Christians face death. I've done a lot of funerals for Christians, a lot for non-Christians. It's a totally different experience. The faith base that we have should help us overcome the fear of the ultimate enemy of death. Now, that doesn't mean we don't fear the virus. That doesn't mean we're not careful. We don't wash our hands or wear a mask or whatever we're supposed to do. What it means is we have a different perspective of those things. The second thing that I think is really important is, because of our small group ministry, most Christians in our church, actually about 40%, are engaged in small groups. They have a social network, and everybody has a social network. But not all social networks are asking the important questions of, how is your soul? How is your faith? What are your fears? What are your resources for overcoming those fears? So I think the natural network of a local church is really helpful. A third thing I think that happens is in the midst of worship. I had a friend of mine, totally unrelated to the coronavirus, Her son last Thursday died of an accidental overdose because of Lyme disease. He had been self-medicating, and it just got out of hand. She was undone for 3 days, but we put together a simple worship service, about 20 people in the room. I led in some prayer. Another guy led in some worship. The healing of the worship of God was miraculous. There is nothing like the worship of God to put people at ease when you invite the Holy Spirit into the pain that you're feeling. And so I believe that when churches start reopening carefully, the worship of God is going to be like a balm on an open wound.
Mm. I can envision it in a way too, this being estranged for a season. When we worked overseas in Kenya, spoke a different language, ate different foods, had a different worldview. When I came back into my home culture to worship, Mark, tears were just rolling down. I can imagine there's going to be lots of people as followers of Jesus didn't realize what they were missing by the fellowship and to worship the living God together, to your point.
Yeah, and it is actually creating a problem for us because the mandate is social distancing. We're not putting seats apart from one another, but we're spreading the rows farther. So we initially, we're watching other churches that open pretty early. They're having like 25% attendance. I don't think we're going to be there in 2-3 weeks. I'm guessing we will be at around 70 or 80% attendance. So now immediately we have to, for example, we were thinking about not having children's services. But when we open, we're talking about, nope, let's go full board, because if you don't have children's spaces filled, then that puts all the pressure on the main auditorium. And we don't know because we're not open yet. I think we're going to be packed day one.
To your point about the hunger that our souls have for that community.
That's right. That's right.
With the Lord. Mark, you're a great author as well as speaker. I'm going to take this. We didn't really talk about. I want to plug your book and Core 52. Tell us a little bit about it. How does that fit into such a time as this? I think it does. Tell me a little bit about what you're finding and how it's responding.
Yeah, there are actually several dozen churches that started Core 52 in January. So it's a simple book, 52 chapters. Each chapter is one of the most important verses for Christians to know. So think about it as a whole Bible theology, like in Cliff Notes. So you're just getting the high points. Those churches that have been using it, they already had their small groups engaged. It has been a lifeline, keeping small groups centered in God's word. And it's been kind of like a pillar where they can all pivot back to immediately. So yeah, Core 52 has been really helpful for small groups in general, but especially now that small group ministry is our only avenue for watch parties and things like that. I just see the hand of God in the timing of Core 52 in the local church.
Put you on the spot here. What were one or two of the best of the 52 topics that, because of the pandemic, you said, wow, those kind of rose to the top?
Well, clearly the chapter on Philippians 4, be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication. That was one. Surprisingly, chapter 2, which is on Genesis 1:26, you're created in the image of God. When you understand your identity clearly, boy, that puts a lot of things in perspective. And the chapter on Sabbath and the importance of rest, and not just sufficient sleep or not just taking a walk, but really pulling the family around the dinner table. Those habits that we were forced into. Now, some people who don't have a biblical background, they're just staying at home and watching Netflix. And their families probably are not taking full advantage of a quarantine. But those who know how to have a spiritual conversation around a dinner table or a prayer time or mutual support, this has actually been a good time for families and marriages.
Great point. Well, I'd love to visit more, but I know we got to bring this to a close. What would be your words of encouragement to listeners as we've gone through? What should we have heard from God, and what should we take into this new post-COVID readjusting session of life that we're all going to enter?
Yeah, that's a really insightful question, Mike. Probably what I'm saying to myself, and perhaps to other people as well, is when the world is at its worst, the church is at its best. We have to be the calm in the storm. And when everybody else runs away, we run too. And there's actually strong documented evidence through church history. Every pandemic, Christians have been the best nurses, the best caretakers, because we don't fear death. And so literally twice during the Roman Empire, first few hundred years of the church, a pandemic destroyed between 15 and 25% of the population. But Christians actually grew not only in percentages, but in numbers because of their compassionate care for other people. And we're poised to do that again with the coronavirus. I think looking back, not only will it be one of the best gifts to families who now we can't focus on finances because that's shot, but we focus on meals in homes. We focus on connecting in calls. We focus in worshiping God and praying fervently. That can only strengthen the fiber of families. And if families have a spiritual fiber, finances will always follow. So I'm not actually worried about the economy. It's one of the ebbs and flows, which we will always have. But the family has been under such severe attack for so long. This actually may be one of the greatest gifts of God to our families.
Great words, Mark. As always, it's great to talk to you. And for all of you today, we hope you've enjoyed another episode here of Faith Greater Than Fear with our guest today, Mark Moore from Christ Church in the Valley there in Phoenix, Arizona. He mentioned his book. I would strongly encourage you, Core 52, check it out, see how it could help you in the family, as Mark mentioned, and in your small group or in your church, wherever you find yourself. So until next time, we here at GNPI in Joplin want to thank you, Mark, for your words, and to invite you on social media. If you like what we've heard, what you've heard from our brother, please share it on social media, share it in any way you can, because we do want to be, as Mark said, those who walk into and lean into the challenges and be God's witnesses and helpers and ambassadors for such a time as this. So stay tuned until next time for another episode of Faith Greater Than Fear.